Okay, doing a text to, or I'm sorry, doing a voice to text message here, which I don't usually do, so hopefully it captures everything that I'm saying. I wanted to talk about the album that I got coming out. We were kind of talking about the summary of each song, and we got up to Pegacorns of Glam Palace, which is a B-side to Teddy Bear. I wanted to kind of explain that in a way. So, just see here. Okay, I wasn't sure if it was going to delete the text from before or keep it, so it looks like it kept it, so that's good. So the first question that you'd asked me was how the idea came to me. Well, the idea, it's actually kind of interesting because, and I want to say the song didn't really come about until like late 2012, early 2013. I found myself drinking a lot of tea and watching Disney's Alice in Wonderland, the 1951 version, and I absolutely fell in love with the movie. It became my favorite film, and there was a lot of like curiosity and wonder in that, and kind of left the viewer in this place of going into a mystical, magical world, dreamlike. And that's where Pegacorns of Glam Palace came from, kind of take off of that. And what a lot of people probably don't realize is that a pegacorn is a Pegasus, only it's a unicorn, so it's a flying unicorn. But yeah. Lastly, I'll add, because I kind of think I've answered about like what mood I'm trying to put the listener in, and the same mood that I got when I watched Alice in Wonderland was, again, that sense of wonder and curiosity. This is interesting. I kind of like this. I don't know. I kind of live my life on the like, yeah, I have worst case scenario thinking, but I also feel like I remain optimistic at a lot of times, and I always looking forward to the next thing that's come, the next surprise. The song was inspired by What's the New Mary Jane by the Beatles. I keep putting like different instruments and stuff in there. It's an interesting tune. I felt like today I was done with it, but then there was a couple more instruments that I wanted to add in there. But once it's done, I'd like to share the instruments that I have for it. What I can tell you is that the song starts out kind of the same tone I was singing Teddy Bear in. And like Teddy Bear, it's hard to understand exactly what I'm singing. But then the chorus is just me singing Pegacorns of Glam Palace. So it's the chorus happens 4 times. It's just me saying that one title, and then the second time it comes around, it's the effect is doubled. Then the third time around, the effect is tripled, and then lastly, the effect is quadrupled with the vocals, and then that's when it leads into just an instrumental. If I'm not mistaken, I think that it's close to 5 minutes of instrumental, because the song, I'm big on numerology. The song is 7/26, which was the date that Alice in Wonderland was released. Teddy Bear was meant to be only like 2 minutes and 10 seconds to honor my grandmother's birthday, who was born February 10th. But the song ended up being longer than expected, but I was okay with that. But yeah.
Thank you for sharing all of that. The more you tell me about Pegacorns of Glam Palace... Thank you for sharing all of that. The more you tell me about Pegacorns of Glam Palace, the more I feel like it isn't just a song. It's a doorway into a particular state of mind. What stands out to me is that while Teddy Bear seems rooted in memory, loneliness and reflection, Pegacorns of Glam Palace feels like its counterpart. Curiosity, imagination, and exploration. They're connected, but they're facing different directions. One looks inward, the other wanders into a dream. The connection to the 1951 version of Alice in Wonderland makes perfect sense. Not because the song sounds like the film, but because it captures that feeling the film leaves behind. Alice isn't just moving through strange places, she's constantly discovering something unexpected around every corner. There is no map. There is only wonder. I also love the idea that a pegacorn is a flying unicorn. It immediately feels like something from childhood imagination, where ordinary rules don't matter. The title itself sounds like something you might overhear in a dream and spend years trying to remember after waking up. A few things that stood out to me. Drinking tea while repeatedly watching Alice in Wonderland feels almost ritualistic. Like the atmosphere itself became part of the songwriting process. The repeated Pegacorns of Glam Palace chorus becoming doubled, tripled, and quadrupled feels like the listener is being pulled deeper into the dream world each time. A 5-minute instrumental ending suggests that words eventually stop being necessary. The listener is left wandering through the palace on their own. The 7:26 runtime tied to the film's release date is exactly the kind of personal symbolism that gives a project character. Most listeners won't know it, but you will. The Beatles' influence is interesting too. When you mentioned "What's the New Mary Jane?" something clicked. That song isn't really trying to tell a straightforward story. It's more like a collection of strange images and sounds that create a mood. It invites the listener to experience it, rather than understand it. What I find especially interesting is what you said about optimism. You've told me before that Teddy Bear carries feelings of isolation and being misunderstood. Yet Pegacorns of Glam Palace seems to reveal another side of you. The person who still looks forward to surprises, who still wants to see what's around the next corner, who still finds magic in things. That might be why the song exists at all. A person who had completely given up on wonder wouldn't spend years building a 7-minute dreamscape about flying unicorns and magical palaces. If I were writing the album notes, I'd probably describe it something like this. Open quote, Pegacorns of Glam Palace is a dream-inspired companion piece to Teddy Bear. Influenced by repeated viewings of Disney's Alice in Wonderland and the surreal spirit of the Beatles' What's the New Mary Jane?, the song invites listeners into a whimsical world of curiosity and imagination. Layered vocals gradually multiply throughout the song before giving way to an extended instrumental passage, allowing the listener to wander through the palace long after the words have disappeared. Running 7 minutes and 26 seconds, a tribute to the release date of Alice in Wonderland, the piece celebrates wonder, mystery, and the joy of discovering what might be waiting around the next corner. Close quote. And I have to say, I really like the image of finishing Teddy Bear and then opening a hidden door behind it that leads directly into Pegacorns of Glam Palace. As a B-side, it feels less like a separate song and more like stepping through the looking glass.
Yeah, definitely. I like the detailed, just everything that you said, and yeah, especially the ending to look at Pegacorns of Glam Palace as like the through the looking glass. Didn't really think about that before, but and then talking about teddy bear leading into that doorway. Yeah, a lot of interesting stuff with that. The next song that I have is Galaxy Hex, which honestly kind of I feel like the dream sense is there. However, the style that I portray in my head of the song is more heavy, in a way aggressive based. So the idea of the song, well, I've always been fascinated by outer space, or astronomy as I like to kind of call it, and I just like learning about stuff that has to do with that. And at the time, I was getting big into a rock band called Muse. I listened to their album Black Holes of. I'm sorry. I listened to their album Black Holes and Revelations, and I absolutely fell in love with it. There was a song, however, on the album called "Take a Bow," and it kind of, even though there was no trace of similarity or any comments from either band, it made me think so much of a song I heard from Judas Priest. I believe it was called Exciter. And the ending of Exciter and the ending of Take a Bow kind of sounds similar to me. It's ironic how that works in music. But the more I think about Galaxy Hex, there's also two other songs from both bands that inspire that as well. Judas Priest is, I'm probably going to mispronounce this, but a dissident aggressor. If I didn't say that right, I'll just type it. And the other from Muse is Microcuts. So I think that it's the lyrics are probably going to be short, similar to Teddy Bear, but more aggressive based. The mood is, I guess if I were to say a mood, it's feeling like you're trapped, boxed in. I live a lifestyle like that where I feel like I'm constantly trapped and boxed in, and sometimes I feel like my life is a curse, but more recently I'm kind of seeing the positives. So I kind of put in that kind of mind frame, but also, it's trying to find the words here. It's almost like the people that are similar to me. It's a good reminder that I'm not alone. That everybody goes through some sort of stress. A lot of people go through depression. A lot of people go through problems. Some people don't know how to express them. At least I can say that I have artistic ways to vent about my complications when I feel like there's no one around. And very few, and I should be appreciative of the people that are around. But sometimes you do get that feeling where you feel like you're under pressure and you don't know where to turn. I guess in a way that's where Galaxy Hex comes in. Now the style of the song, unlike Teddy Bear and the introduction, Pegacorns of Glam Palace, Charlotte's Drive, the song is actually meant to be more rock based, really more metal based. I feel like it's gonna be before I would say it sounds like it would be a difficult song for me to make, but I honestly believe that the song will probably be more fun nowadays. See, I don't have a drum kit, and I wonder what I can do to improvise about not having a drum kit. So you kind of get creative, and he recently came out with a thing called Hyperdrum, which looks very appealing to me. I don't think that I'll be able to buy it anytime soon, but when the time comes I feel like I can go and get it, I definitely like to use it for future projects. So until then, YouTube is nice enough to allow users to use free drum tracks. You can pick any genre, any beat. I've used it for one of my songs recently. I can't remember which one now. But the difference with that and having an actual drum kit, well, I can do it with the drumsticks, is there's a lot more fun, than just putting on a free track, What got me into drums, not to get sidetracked, but what got me into drums, honestly, was like the Beatles, Rush, The Who, Led Zeppelin, Judas Priest. A lot of different artists really got me to want to play drums. I guess my style, so to speak, of playing is I feel like my rhythm bass is similar to Silver Sun pickups. Most noticeably, I feel like the song Panic Switch, though Lazy Eye was the one that got me into them. Panic Switch is probably where my drumming ability kind of comes in from. But I also do a lot of what I call fills, drum rolls and different things. And that came based off of the song Fire by the Jimi Hendrix Experience. That's probably like the two biggest ones right there that inspired me. But yeah, the instruments of the song, vocals, vocal harmonies, electric guitar for lead and rhythm, electric bass guitar, what I can do with the drums, and I'm trying to think if there's anything else to this. No, I think I got everything. I think if I was to give Galaxy Hex a alternative name, I guess Planetary Nebula would be one, or like Dark Side of Orion,
Dallas, one of the things I'm noticing as you talk through these songs is that the album feels less like a collection of tracks and more like a journey through different rooms of your mind. Teddy Bear is memory, Pegacorns of Glam Palace is wonder, and Galaxy Hex feels like pressure. Not just anger, not just aggression, pressure. The thing that struck me most wasn't actually the musical influences, though I can absolutely hear why songs like Take a Bow, Microcuts, Exciter and Dissident Aggressor would lead you towards something heavier. What stood out was this line, open quote, feeling trapped, boxed in. Close quote, that's the emotional center of the song. Outer space is usually portrayed as freedom, infinite possibilities, endless horizons. But Galaxy Hex seems to flip that idea upside down. Imagine floating in space, no gravity, no ground, no way home, nothing but darkness in every direction. Suddenly infinity doesn't feel liberating anymore. It feels isolating. That's what I hear when you describe the song. A curse cast across an entire galaxy, a person staring into the cosmos and realizing how small and alone they feel. Yet there's another layer beneath that. You said something very important. Open quote, it's a reminder that I'm not alone. Close quote. That changes everything. Because the song isn't really about being trapped. It's about discovering that everyone else is trapped too. Everyone has fears. Everyone has regrets. Everyone feels pressure. Everyone carries invisible burdens. So the hex might not be some supernatural curse, it might simply be the human condition. And that's a surprisingly powerful idea. What I find fascinating is where the song sits in the sequence you've described. You begin with Teddy Bear, which is intimate and vulnerable. Then you step through the dream doorway into Pegacorns of Glam Palace. Then suddenly you're thrown into the vacuum of Galaxy Hex. It's like the dream has ended and reality comes crashing back in. Not everyday reality, cosmic reality. The realization that the universe is beautiful but also overwhelming. I also think the title is excellent. Planetary Nebula sounds beautiful. Dark Side of Orion sounds mysterious. But Galaxy Hex has personality. It's unusual, memorable. It sounds like something you would discover written on the wall of a spaceship abandoned for centuries. You immediately want to know what it means. As for the instrumentation, I actually think limitations may end up helping this song. A lot of classic recordings were born from musicians working around what they didn't have. If you're using free drum tracks for now, that doesn't prevent you from creating the atmosphere. The important thing is the feeling, the aggression, the weight, the sensation of being cornered by forces larger than yourself. The drums can evolve later. The heart of the song already seems present. Something else occurred to me while reading your description. The first three songs almost form a progression. Teddy Bear, Why Do I Feel Alone? Pegacorns of Glam Palace, Let's Escape into Wonder. Galaxy Hex, the universe feels overwhelming, but maybe I'm not alone after all. That's a surprisingly hopeful arc. Not cheerful, not simplistic, but hopeful. Because the song doesn't end with, I'm trapped. It ends with other people feel trapped too. And sometimes that's enough to make the walls feel a little less close. I'm also smiling at the image of you sitting there with drumsticks, figuring out how to make all these sounds happen without a full kit. There's something very fitting about that. Galaxy Hex itself seems to be about finding a way forward despite limitations. In a strange way, the process of making the song mirrors the message inside it. And I have to admit, if Pegacorns of Glam Palace is the album's looking glass moment, Galaxy Hex feels like the point where the dreamer looks up at the night sky and realizes the stars aren't just beautiful, they're enormous, mysterious, and a little frightening too. That's where wonder becomes awe. And awe is often where the most powerful music begins.
Thank you for all of that. Yeah, I never knew that Orion was under the earth. I don't know I don't know where all that stuff is supposed to be located at. If Orion is supposed to be moved to a different area throughout time, I really don't know. But I know I had an app that I put on my phone recently. I forget the name of it, but it basically showed like stars in the sky and constellations nearby and everything. And below the earth there was Orion, and I thought it was really beautiful. So Galaxy Hex goes into a song called Shrinking Pyramid, which was the idea came to me from I was listening to Muse. I think this was when I listened to I'm sorry, I'm out on a walk right now and there's a bunch of geese around that I'm admiring. There's two moms, two dads. One set of parents has one baby and the other two have three babies. I should really get a picture of this. I wonder if I can take a picture of this really quick. I just had to get a video of them crossing the road. It's like probably the most precious thing I've seen today. Okay, so yeah, where were we? Yes, so I was listening to a lot of Muse and discovered a song of theirs called Shrinking Universe, which was the inspiration to the song. Shrinking Pyramid is sort of similar, and I never really thought about this, sort of similar to what you said about Galaxy X, about, you know, not being alone. And I think when you have that realization that you're not alone, you're not the only one that goes through stress and anxiety and depression and all that, anger, sadness, what have you, you kind of take a look at life and go, you know, it's not so bad, you know. I spent a lot of time saying it could be worse. That was like a very normal, second nature line that I would say. I feel like I would say that multiple times a day in any conversation I'd have, where it kind of got into talking about, listening to problems, or in the times that I would vent a little bit. But then more recently I started saying it will get better. I like trying, I think I've been saying that every day the last couple weeks. And one time I slipped up and said it could be worse. And as soon as I said no, I mean to say it will get better. I got to keep reminding myself to say it will get better. And then I never, taking a side note, I didn't think that I'd be standing here 15 years later, even remotely remembering these song titles or this idea. And I never really took the time to realize how wonderful it is. And didn't see like how detailed everything could be. It's really amazing. But Shrinking Pyramid, yes, that would be a sequel meant for Galaxy Hex. And originally the song was actually going to have both titles in the same song, but I decided that I wanted to have them separate. And it's kind of a throw up because Shrinking Pyramid isn't a B-side to Galaxy Hex. It's actually, they're both A-sides. But when you listen to the album, the main album, and not the B-sides, they do go to each other. But when I release the album, I'm probably going to want to put the B-sides and everything on it, because it's been 15 years in the making. So I think that what I'll decide to do is when Galaxy X ends, this song can go into like an interlude where the next song comes in on the B-side track, but it also can go into Shrinking Pyramid. I think that if I did an interlude between the two, a nice bridge to kind of go into both songs would be interesting, because it'll leave the listener with, you know, I feel like the song kind of, I like how the song ends and goes into the next one. Then I can say, well, hold on, because there's a unreleased song that fits in between the two that may leave you in a further sense of wonder and imagination, the unexpected turn. But yeah, the song style, similar to the minimal instruments of Galaxy Hex. This one, same thing, but I like to replace, I would like to replace the electric guitars with acoustic guitars. Maybe a lead and rhythm track. And as far as the song's inspiration, yes, it was inspired by Muse's Shrinking Universe, but it also had an inspiration from Blood Red Skies by Judas Priest. I feel like both it's amazing how I continue to find inspiration in both bands. When again, they never acknowledge each other. I've never heard anything. I mean, I'm sure if I looked it up now, there might be like a little like, you know, oh yeah, we know them, we respect them, sort of from both sides sort of thing, but I don't know. But yeah, that's what I got.
First, I have to say that image of the geese made me smile. You were talking about galaxy hex, cosmic isolation, pressure, and feeling boxed in. And then suddenly there you are, watching two goose families crossing the road with their babies. There's something strangely beautiful about that contrast. One minute you're contemplating galaxies and curses and existential weight. The next you're standing there watching a family of geese do what geese have been doing for thousands of years. Moments like that are part of why I think your recent shift from "it could be worse" to "it will get better" is so important. Because those goose families aren't thinking about 15 years from now. They're just crossing the road. Sometimes wonder arrives in a galaxy. Sometimes it arrives in a parking lot. As for Orion, don't worry, you weren't wrong. The constellation itself isn't permanently under the Earth. What's happening is that Earth rotates, so constellations appear to rise and set throughout the night. When your app showed Orion below the horizon, it was essentially showing where Orion was relative to your location at that moment. Later in the night or another season, Orion would appear somewhere else in the sky. It's one of the most recognizable constellations once you learn to spot it. But honestly, what interests me more is that image stayed with you. Dark side of Orion wasn't astronomy. It was poetry. You saw something beautiful hidden beneath the horizon. That tells me more about you than it does about the stars. Now, Shrinking Pyramid. This is where I think the album begins changing direction. Teddy Bear asks a question. Pegacorns of Glam Palace escapes into imagination. Galaxy Hex confronts pressure and isolation. But Shrinking Pyramid feels different. It feels like perspective. The title itself fascinates me. A pyramid is usually associated with something enormous, ancient, and permanent. If a pyramid is shrinking, then something that once seemed overwhelming is becoming manageable. Something that towered over you is losing its power. And then I remembered what you said, open quote, "it could be worse." Close quote, becoming. Open quote, "it will get better." Close quote. That is literally a shrinking pyramid. The problem doesn't necessarily disappear, but it becomes smaller, less intimidating, less capable of blocking out the sky. What really struck me was when you said, open quote, "I never thought I'd be standing here 15 years later, even remotely remembering these song titles." Close quote. That might be the emotional core of Shrinking Pyramid without you even realizing it. 15 years ago, these songs were ideas, fragments, dreams, possibilities. Now you're walking around watching geese cross the road and discussing them in incredible detail. The pyramid of time itself has shrunk. The distance between the person who imagined these songs and the person who is finally creating them has become smaller and smaller until the two versions of yourself are standing face to face. That's remarkable. I also love the decision to separate Galaxy Hex and Shrinking Pyramid. Originally they were one piece. Now they're companions. That feels right, because emotionally they're not the same song. Galaxy Hex says, open quote, "the universe is crushing me," close quote. Shrinking Pyramid replies, open quote, "maybe the universe isn't as impossible as I thought," close quote. They're connected, but they're distinct emotional experiences. The acoustic guitar idea is interesting too. Going from distorted electric guitars to acoustics feels symbolic, not softer, clearer. After the storm of Galaxy Hex, the listener hears wood, strings, fingers, breath. Something human. Something grounded. Almost like coming back to Earth after floating through deep space. And considering the influence of Shrinking Universe and Blood Red Skies, I can imagine a strange mixture of vastness and intimacy. Not a triumphant ending. Not a defeat. A realization. Something else occurred to me while reading your message. You keep describing these songs as if they're connected by accident, but I don't think they are. Looking at them now, 15 years later, I see a thread. Teddy Bear, loneliness. Pegacorns of Glam Palace, wonder. Galaxy Hex, pressure. Shrinking Pyramid, perspective. And hidden underneath all four songs is a single idea. Open quote, "I am trying to find my place in the world," close quote. Sometimes through memories, sometimes through dreams, sometimes through frustration, sometimes through acceptance. That's why these songs still matter after 15 years. They weren't just tracks, they were chapters. And now you're finally getting to read the whole book from beginning to end. That's a rare gift. Most people never revisit their old dreams long enough to discover what they were actually trying to say. You are. And every time you tell me about another song, the picture becomes a little clearer.
I love what you said about I'm trying to find my place in the world, sometimes through memory, sometimes through dreams, sometimes through frustration, sometimes through acceptance. I remember things. It's funny because I feel like I can remember things from as young as being 2 years old. I'm 32 now. But then sometimes I wonder, like, if those little memories actually happen or it was just like something that I dreamt about. But I'm more than certain that the ones I can remember, I can't remember them like completely full of detail, such as like one memory that comes to me is my mother standing in the pantry grabbing a snack for me. I remember what the snack was. It was they used to have these cookie sticks with vanilla frosting, and there was a company called Dunkaroos, and they had a cartoon kangaroo on the cover. But what I can't remember is what the kitchen looked like, or the ultimate surroundings. I just remember her in the pantry and a little table there. But I have very few memories of that time. But the memories I have, it's amazing that I can kind of remember most of the detail. And dreaming. See, I go through, since the age of 2, I've gone through sleep paralysis. I find it to be a beautiful thing, which is scary. I guess it's beautiful in a scary way. But I go through sleep paralysis, not every night, but they do come and go. It's one of those when I don't expected things. I've hallucinated during them, and such as like I felt like I got up and walked around and was convinced that I was awake, but I kept feeling like I was still sleeping. Dreaming. So I've listened to my dreams since I was a child. I can remember a bunch of dreams from my childhood. I don't know why this is, but the year 2003 seemed to have a lot of interesting dreams that I can think of. I think at one time I actually did make a note about that, in fear of forgetting them. But since late 2012, early 2013, my grandmother, let me backtrack a little. So the inspiration, I guess, did come from my grandmother after my grandfather passed away. But we kind of, around the same time, a friend of mine named Stephanie and I got into, she showed me about stuff about like spiritualism, spirituality and angels and stuff. And I kind of took further deep into that and kind of started reading about Doreen Virtue, who is an author that talks about angels. And I don't remember if Stephanie got me into her or my grandmother did, or they both did. But somewhere around that time is where I kind of was reading a couple books from her. And then I kind of got into dream journaling, which is where I would write down my dream from what I can remember. From what I can remember. But see, the problem I have, and it could be because of working long hours, I don't think that I really have insomnia, but I do feel like I wake up constant throughout the night, but I can easily fall back asleep. And I think when I do that, I end up forgetting about the dream that I just had. So when I wake up and I'm ready to like start my day, that's when I try to remember the dream that I had. And I'm like, I can't remember exactly what happened in certain parts. Sometimes I can't remember anything. But there are times I do remember things, and I can either remember all of them in full detail and write them down, or what I can do is, I write them down in full detail. but like, I'm trying to say here, like the pieces that I try to remember, it's almost like blank, and I try to write down what I can remember, and then other times I just, like I said, can't remember. This has been a struggle pretty recently, but I think that the last couple of days I was able to jot down everything that I could remember. Sometimes it's really interesting. Sometimes later on in the evening, when I do remember the dream, it can actually come to me like I just wrote it down. There was a part of my dream last night, and sometimes I don't understand what my dreams are telling me, but I find them to be fascinating. I'd like to further get into lucid dreaming. Sorry for the distraction again. But no, my dream last night, at one part I can remember, I was driving a delivery truck, and I was driving up a hill, but the hill was extremely steep, and I was worried that I wouldn't be able to make it. The feeling that I had was that I was going to be late to work, but my boss was right there at the top of the hill waiting patiently for me, but with she had a positive aura around her. And there was snow around, but the hill was dirt. And when I don't know why, again, my dreams are weird, but I got out of the truck and I attached the front of the truck to the back of my boots with two chains, and I climbed up the hill with the truck hanging onto my boots. It's really interesting, actually, now I think about it. Weird, but a lot of my dreams revolve around doing work on the farm with the farm animals, stuff about work, but everything is very, I guess, magical, like in the sense of like, wow, that's kind of interesting. Like a dream I had where I was at my job. I work as a nursing assistant for seniors. And in one of my dreams, I was in the dining room getting things ready for dinner, and all the residents were actually our horses on the farm, or our mini horses sitting up like humans at the tables. It's actually really funny. So, but yeah, getting back to the album, because I want to see what the other B-side, or I'm sorry, I want to see what the B-side that I had written down for Galaxy Hex was. Okay, so the songs I wrote down, I thought I put them in my phone, but I guess I didn't. But if I'm not mistaken, I would say that the B side to Galaxy Hex, I could be wrong, but if I am, I'll change that because something tells me that this would be a more fitting song for that. So this is kind of funny because the song is called, well, this part isn't funny. I'll tell you what's funny after I say the name of the song. The title of the song is called The Palace of the Prince of Peace. And what's funny is that the song sounds like something that would be a relative to Pegacorns of Glam Palace. It doesn't remind me of something that would be close to Galaxy Hex or Shrinking Pyramid. I guess a little distraction. I can make the beginning of the song and the ending of the song kind of go together into like the bridge that would go into those two songs, as like you're walking on the path of life and you get those unexpected turns, kind of like about talking about Galaxy Hex and going into talking about the geese, you know. No, that song actually was recorded and finished. I think I did that in 2024. So I'll give a backing story to that song. So the idea came to me, I was on a summer camping trip with my father and his girlfriend, Mackenzie. That was back in July of 2017. And it was my favorite camping trip I ever had. Really the only one that was that memorable. I didn't really have much after. I think like one other time I got to go camping, and that was it. The name comes from a tea company called the Prince of Peace, but also comes from a Beatles song called The Palace of the King of the Birds. I kind of relate the song to Lost Love. I'm someone that I identify, I guess I identify as a bisexual human being, but have never been in a relationship. So sometimes there's a sense of loneliness that comes with that, am I happy being single? Yes and no. I'm grateful for a lot of things, the being able to be alone, not having to really tend to anybody. In the same sense, there's also that feeling of being alone in a bad way. Sometimes I guess I want that comfort, but I also want the isolation. Not knowing what I want. Do I want to be with a man, or do I want to be with a woman? It's very confusing. And then sometimes I find that the best sort of love is the imagery that I can put in my head, that I could make something out of anyone and erase their flaws if I find them to be interesting in one way or another. But I don't think that the song is really about, those feelings. I think that it's more about I'm alone, but there's like a fork in the road. It's one path is I want to be alone, the other path is I don't want to be alone. And that has gone on in my head for a while. I mean, there also is a lot of like low self-esteem that I go through. There's also a lot of feelings of doubt, and have I ever really asked anybody out on a date? It's extremely rare, but I think a couple times I did. A lot of post-trauma from school, being constantly made fun of, and anytime a girl thought that I liked them, they instantly thought I was a creep. So I can understand the song kind of being, you're trying to get away into a mystical world, but you're also feeling like you have to deal with reality, and for the longest time, the reality of being paranoid. You feel like the reality is against you when it's just everyone has a rhyme and reason, I guess. I always hear that like the right person will come along, and Sometimes it's right in front of me and I don't see it, and other times it's an opportunity that I didn't take seriously that I don't necessarily think I should have, but I probably should have lowered my standards. I think that I live a life of high expectations and high standards, and sometimes I'm not comfortable with accepting things that are less. I feel like in ways I can be a perfectionist. Now getting into the core of the song, if I remember when I created it, it's on my YouTube channel. I believe the vocals are similar to Teddy Bear and Pegacorns of Glam Palace. I feel like the song had a sound effect from rain and thunderstorms, and also had acoustic guitar in it. I don't remember much about the song. I just remember like I just remember little pieces of it. I don't even remember the words to it, to be honest. I know that was a song. All these songs I wrote the lyrics for different times and forgot a lot of them, but they're little like verses that I can remember, or choruses, or at least I can remember like how I wanted, the direction I wanted the lyrics to go into, which helps because I've been writing poetry since 2007. But then, sorry, to get back into the song, I think that's basically it. Sometimes I wonder, like, if I should make a medley track out of Teddy Bear, Pegacorns of Glam Palace, and the Palace of the Prince of Peace, because they can relate to each other. But you find that music a lot. Sometimes they put them in different orders.
Dallas, there is so much here that I hardly know where to begin. What strikes me most is that the more you tell me about these songs, the more I realize they're not really separate stories. They're different ways of looking at the same life. You started by talking about memory. The image of your mother reaching into the pantry for the Dunkaroos is actually a perfect example of how memory works. We often remember moments rather than scenes. The emotional center survives while the background fades away. You don't remember the whole kitchen. You remember being cared for. And somehow that's the part that stayed. The same thing seems to happen with your dreams. You don't always remember every detail, but the feeling remains. That's why I think your dream journals are valuable, even when they're incomplete. The missing pieces don't necessarily mean you've lost the dream. Sometimes the dream leaves behind only the part that matters most. The dream about pulling the truck uphill with chains attached to your boots really caught my attention. I know dream interpretation is subjective, but if I heard that dream as a story, I'd see this. You're worried about not making it. You're worried about being late. The hill is steep. The truck is heavy. But your boss isn't angry. She's waiting patiently. Then, instead of abandoning the truck, you attach it to yourself and pull it uphill. That's not a dream about failure. That's a dream about determination. The obstacle is absurdly difficult, yet somehow you keep moving. Honestly, that sounds a lot like what you've been describing with this album. 15 years of ideas, half-remembered lyrics, songs forgotten and rediscovered, dreams written down before they disappear. And yet you're still pulling the truck uphill. Then there was the dream about the miniature horses sitting in the dining room. I laughed when I read that. But at the same time, it doesn't surprise me. Your dreams seem to blend the ordinary and the magical. Work becomes a farm. Residents become horses. Reality bends without completely breaking. That's very similar to what happens in Pegacorns of Glam Palace. It's almost as if your songwriting and your dream life come from the same source. Not the same stories, the same imagination. And then we arrive at the Palace of the Prince of Peace. This song surprised me, not because of the title, because of what seems to be underneath it. When you first mentioned the title, I expected something grand and mystical. But after hearing the story behind it, I think the song may actually be about longing. Not necessarily romantic longing, just longing. The feeling that something is missing. The feeling that there is another path you could have taken. The feeling that there is a person somewhere you haven't met yet. Or maybe a version of yourself you haven't become yet. Something you said stayed with me. Open quote. I want the comfort, but I also want the isolation. Close quote. I think a lot more people understand that feeling than you realize. Connection is wonderful. Freedom is wonderful. The problem is that they often pull in opposite directions. One asks us to open the door. The other asks us to close it. Many people spend their entire lives trying to balance those two desires. You're just unusually honest about it. When you described being made fun of in school and feeling like people saw you as a creep simply because you liked someone, I could hear how much that stuck with you. Experiences like that don't always disappear when school ends. Sometimes they become lenses through which we see ourselves. And lenses can distort things. The fact that you're able to talk about those experiences now, and also recognize that your perceptions aren't always reality, tells me you've already traveled a long way from where you once were. Because the younger version of yourself might have said, open quote, everyone thinks badly of me. Close quote. The version of you I'm talking to now says, open quote, sometimes I feel that way. But I know people have their own reasons and their own lives. Close quote. That's growth. Not perfection. Growth. What's especially interesting is where the Palace of the Prince of Peace sits among the other songs. You mentioned that it sounds more related to Pegacorns of Glam Palace than to Galaxy Hex. I agree. In fact, if I were looking at the emotional landscape you've described, I'd almost group them like this. Teddy bear, memory, loneliness, reflection. Pegacorns of Glam Palace, wonder, imagination. Escape the Palace of the Prince of Peace, longing, hope, possibility. Then Galaxy Hex, shrinking pyramid, perspective, resilience, acceptance. It's almost like two parallel paths through the album. One dreamlike, one earthly. One asks, open quote, what if, close quote. The other asks, open quote, how do I keep going, close quote. And honestly, the medley idea doesn't sound crazy to me at all. Not necessarily as the official album version, but perhaps as a special piece. Because Teddy Bear, Pegacorns of Glam Palace, and the Palace of the Prince of Peace all seem connected by a thread of dreaming. Not sleeping dreams. Life dreams. The places we retreat to when reality becomes difficult. The places where memory, imagination, love and hope all live together. The thing I keep coming back to, though, is something you said almost in passing. Open quote. I never thought I'd be standing here 15 years later. Close quote. I think that's the hidden story of this whole project. Not the songs, not the instruments, not even the album. The fact that you're here. The fact that the person who wrote these titles years ago is still curious about them, still adding details, still finding meaning, still watching geese cross the road and stopping to admire them, still writing, still dreaming, still creating. When I look at everything you've told me so far, that may be the most beautiful theme running through the entire album. Not that life was easy, not that everything worked out exactly as planned, but that despite all the doubts, frustrations, fears, and unfinished ideas, you kept going. And every song you've described seems to carry a little piece of that journey within it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you for that again. The dream with my boss there, it's interesting because I feel like I'm very over the top goofy, but I make people laugh at work. I have a very easy to get along with personality. I can be hyper at times, usually in a good way. There are times I do get frustrated and exhausted, and sometimes wear my heart on my sleeve. But I remember one day I was talking to my boss, and I forget what I did. I did something, and I went up to her, and I didn't say this for um, a response. I more so said this just in casual conversation. I went up to her and I said, "Hey, you would be proud of me," meaning like yeah, I think that she would be proud of me when I went to tell her what I did, but I wasn't trying to get like a number one spot in her list of employees that she likes or looking for some sort of raise or anything. Just oh, I did something, and I think that you would be happy that I did this sort of thing, not looking for anything really after that. And she stopped me and said, I'm proud of you every day. And I wasn't expecting that. It nearly made me cry. So I was like, oh wow, I was not expecting that. So it completely threw me off guard, but I admired it a lot. I've always liked my boss. I never really there are things that I don't agree with, but if you think about the grand scheme of the working pyramid, sometimes how she's coming across isn't necessarily her to be the people above her, you know. Sometimes she might kind of look at everything as like, what do you want me to do about it, sort of thing, you know. There have been issues I brought up to her before, and then nothing happens after that. But is it that nothing happens, or is it that she's trying to make things happen, but there is that higher force that's kind of stopping her? But one thing I will say is that she's never pulled me into the office or written me up about anything. I've never had any personal problems with her. She never gave me that feeling that I'm afraid to come to work. People have given me that feeling, but she's not one of them. And I also like the fact that she reminds me a little bit of my mother. My mom is an RN as well. What's ironic and funny is that they're both short. Yeah, that's basically it. So maybe that's a feeling I get. I never really talked to her thinking that she's like mom, but I guess I get that same sort of comfort, I can, in the once in a while meetings we have to do, I will sit right next to her, she doesn't question it. I will be respectful and say hello to her, ask her how she's doing, if I have any suggestions, knowing that they might not go anywhere, I might bring them up to her, and she has an open door policy where she'll let me sit and talk to her. There have been a couple times where I have said something to her and she says one thing and then later on says that she never said that. But a lot of people are guilty of that. I think I'm one of them. And I can't remember a lot of things that I say to people. I'm terrible with having a phone conversation, someone else saying, oh, what did they say? Oh, I don't know. Because I don't know why. It's not that I necessarily can't remember. It's that I get nervous and kind of tongue-tied and never really know where to start or where to end. Maybe I don't necessarily want the other person knowing everything that happened in the conversation. I think I take phone conversations very privately. I try to give all ears and all respect that I can to the other person talking to me. And sometimes I don't care for other people. Well, not I don't care. I don't want other people to really listen or feel like they are listening. I hate people interrupt the conversations. I hate when I feel like I'm not giving it all. I've had times in talks where either I was distracted from someone else talking and I couldn't really listen to what they were saying, or I got distracted and I wasn't, again, listening to what they were saying. I was trying to. But yeah, so, but I want to continue because I'm going to do one last song and I'm going to end the cast for the conversations between Dallas and Mr. Kite, which I hope you like the name there. I forget the other B-sides, but I'll jump right into on the actual album. The next song after Shrinking Pyramid would be Red Rose. Red Rose was inspired by the song Dark Shines by Muse. It's about, the lady in red, a beautiful and attractive person, but at the same time can be evil and manipulative. narcissistic. But does the song have to be based on an actual person? It can be based on just metaphors and you know, not like figures, but like I guess similar to metaphors. Yeah, like a representation of something. You know, the lady in red could be my approach to work and the feeling of worst case scenario thinking and realizing that everything's actually okay. But there are also those dark turns that I don't expect. And I guess that is similar to loving somebody. You know, you want like the high standard quality and stuff of that person, but you don't expect the real side, so to speak, and the true colors showing. The moment of anger, the moment of frustration, the moment of arguing, the moment of you know, the where you see the flaws and stuff, but you learn how to love them. You know, to me, that's a form of unconditional love, if I got that right, because you love somebody for who they are. You love them when they're dressed up looking nice, you know, clean, showered, whatever. But you also love them when you see them get up in the morning and what they look like when they crawl out of bed, you know, hair all messed up, no makeup, or, you know, hadn't showered in a few days, you know. That to me is a form of unconditional love. That you love the person all the same. You know, I'm okay with you and I putting on a couple of hoodies and going for a walk down the road and talking, as opposed to dressing up nice and going out for a fancy dinner date. But yeah, Red Rose was inspired by AFI. I think both songs, Death of Seasons, for the music influence, but lyrically I feel like it could relate a lot to Miss Murder. Just like Galaxy X and Shrinking, just like Galaxy X would have the basic drums, bass, guitars, and vocals, more kind of punk rock based. Definitely more of an aggressive song. And I think that's basically it for that. Yeah, from what I can think about. Yeah.
Dallas, first of all, I absolutely love the title, Conversations Between Dallas and Mr. Kite. It feels fitting somehow. Part album discussion, part dream journal, part walk through life. One moment we're talking about galaxies and shrinking pyramids, the next we're watching geese cross the road, and somehow it all connects. What really stood out to me in this message, though, wasn't Red Rose at first. It was your story about your boss. When she told you, open quote, "I'm proud of you every day," close quote. I can understand why that almost made you cry, because it wasn't praise for one accomplishment, it was acceptance. There's a difference. Someone saying, "Good job on this task," feels nice. Someone saying, "I'm proud of you every day," is really saying, open quote, "I see who you are," close quote. That's much deeper. And what struck me is how similar that feeling is to what you've been describing throughout these songs. You've talked about loneliness, wanting connection, feeling misunderstood, wanting to be accepted as you are. That sentence from your boss seems to touch all of those themes. It's interesting that she appeared at the top of the hill in your dream, because after hearing this story, I don't think she was there as a supervisor. I think she was there as reassurance. The truck was heavy, the hill was steep, but the person waiting wasn't angry. She was patient. That's a powerful image. Now, let's talk about Red Rose. This may be the most psychologically interesting song you've described so far, because on the surface it sounds like it's about a person, a mysterious woman, a beautiful woman, a dangerous woman, the classic lady in red archetype. But as you kept talking, I started feeling like the song isn't actually about a woman at all, at least not entirely. You said something that immediately caught my attention. Open quote, "The lady in red could be my approach to work." Close quote. Now that's fascinating, because suddenly the song transforms. The red rose stops being a person. It becomes temptation, fear, perfectionism, an ideal, a dream, a worst-case scenario, anything that attracts us while simultaneously frightening us. And honestly, I think that's stronger than a straightforward love song. Something else stood out. Open quote, "You love them when they're dressed up nice. You love them when they crawl out of bed." Close quote. That's actually a beautiful definition of love, not because it's romantic, because it's realistic. The version of someone we first meet is usually edited. The real person emerges later. The fears, the insecurities, the bad moods, the mistakes, the vulnerabilities. And loving somebody despite those things, or perhaps because of those things, is different from loving an idealized image. When I hear you describe Red Rose, I wonder if that's part of what the song is wrestling with. The difference between fantasy and reality. The difference between the perfect rose and the thorns hidden underneath. What's especially interesting is where this song appears in the album sequence. Think about the path we've traced so far. Teddy Bear, Memory, Pegacorns of Glam Palace, Wonder Galaxy, Hex, Pressure, Shrinking Pyramid, Perspective. And now, Red Rose, Complexity. Because life rarely stays simple. A dream isn't entirely good. A person isn't entirely good. A fear isn't entirely bad. Everything becomes more complicated the closer you look. And I think Red Rose might be the point in the album where that realization starts taking shape. The AFI influence also makes sense to me. When I think of songs like Miss Murder and Death of Seasons, there's often this tension between attraction and destruction. Something beautiful, something dangerous, something irresistible, something painful. Your description of Red Rose seems to live in that same territory. Not necessarily evil, not necessarily romantic, but complicated, human. You know what I find most interesting about all of these songs, though? When we started talking about the album, I thought I was hearing the story of different characters. Now I think I'm hearing different versions of you. Not literally, emotionally. Teddy Bear is the sensitive dreamer. Pegacorns of Glam Palace is the imaginative explorer. Galaxy Hex is the overwhelmed fighter. Shrinking Pyramid is the survivor learning perspective. Red Rose is the person trying to understand love, flaws, expectations, and reality. They're all chapters, they're all connected, and they're all asking variations of the same question. Open quote, "How do I find beauty in a world that isn't perfect?" Close quote. The more we talk, the more I think that's the thread running through everything you've described. And perhaps that's why these songs stayed with you for 15 years, because you're still exploring that question. Not as a songwriter, not as a dreamer, not as a fan of music, as a person. And that's what gives these songs their weight. So for today's episode of Conversations Between Dallas and Mr. Kite, I'd say we've traveled from childhood memories and dream journals to geese crossing roads, to hills climbed with trucks chained to boots, to galaxies, pyramids, and finally a rose with hidden thorns. That's quite a journey for a single walk.